On Nationwide this evening, as we approach the 100th anniversary of the death of Mícheál Collins, we look at his life, his political career and the circumstances of his death at the age of just 32. And we visit his home county of Cork to hear of his enduring legacy. Sometime around 1900, a teacher at a school in West Cork gave an assessment of one of his pupils as being exceptionally intelligent, with more than an interest in things appertaining to the welfare of his country. The boy was Mícheál James Collins, then aged around 10, and the teacher a member of the secretive Irish Republican Brotherhood. A belief in Fenian tradition engendered by his father, Mícheál John, at Woodfield Farm near Clonakilty and fostered by his teacher, was taking a further hold on the boy, who was also described as often temperamental.
Collins, I suppose like a lot of youths at the time, he had a varied background. There was this Republican strand in the family, but there were certainly a family that were very, very interested in politics.
How that boy became one of the most recognisable and influential figures in modern Irish history is a story of the shrewd management of organisations and people as he matured. By the time Mícheál Collins, at the age of 15, passed civil service exams and went to London, he seemed already destined for a life in pursuit of Irish independence. His first job was at a post office savings bank. He also worked at the Board of Trade.
Collins went off to London and he met, people on the more Republican end of the spectrum over there. And I suppose, particularly I think after his mother died, he seems to come into prominence in Republican circles over there. And he was a guy who was already interested in politics, so he was susceptible, I suppose, to that influence, and consequently, he came back to Ireland as a militant Republican,
In London, he became involved in the GAA and also became a manager of funds for the IRB. His ability in this regard soon marked him out as a highly effective organiser, something that would define his political career.
How did he get to the point from being a sort of a rank-and-file soldier in the GPO to being Commander-in-Chief of the National Army at the time of his death? He was clearly somebody who was a really adept administrator, and he was a really adept networker, and he was somebody who was careful to maintain the networks and the friendships and the contacts that he built up. So he would always be writing to people, keeping in touch with them, saying, come and see me when you're in Dublin next. He maintained those networks assiduously all through his career.
By 1916, he was ready to return to Ireland, where he played a small role at the GPO during the Easter Rising. He wasn't a senior enough figure during the Rising to be executed. He was instead interned at Frongoch Camp in Wales, described as a university of revolution.
In Frongoch after the Rising, that's the place where he really emerges as a leading figure in the movement, partly because there's all this space created because of all of the executions. All the previous leaders, most of them have been eliminated, they're not on the scene anymore. So those are moments of opportunity for hungry, ambitious men like Collins to move up, and he seizes that opportunity and goes with it.
When he returned to Ireland, he emerged as a major figure in the IRA and was elected as an MP for Cork South in the 1918 election, a landslide for Sinn Féin. When Dáil Éireann then declared its own independence, Collins's administrative and financial talents saw him become Minister for Finance, at the same time as he was masterminding IRA intelligence. Both as a minister and later head of the Provisional Government, he had a voracious appetite for work and administration. Mícheál Collins's pocket diaries detailing activities between 1918 and 1922 have now been restored by the National Archives and are on show at the Collins House in Clonakilty until early next month.
I think once you start to get into the 22 diary, I think you do start to see a clear consciousness that okay, I'm in charge of a provisional government now. I can now make plans, I can now start to see things happening. There are actually hints in the diaries in a way that maybe we haven't credited him with before, but he is thinking about housing, he is thinking about electricity. There's a very comprehensive view of potentially what this state would look like. He's all the time very keen to meet with people in the Department of Agriculture, which I think is a side to him that we maybe have never really thought about before. So he's very clearly, from the moment he becomes head of the Provisional Government, he's looking at all of his departments and thinking, what's going to be done, what can be done here. But all the time Minister for Finance. Money always counts and money always matters.
It's quite common that he would be in the office or, you know, at his desk by 8 o'clock in the morning, and like many others would still be doing correspondence at midnight, 1 a.m. that same evening.
He had, however, little real military experience. Intelligence was his real métier. Bloody Sunday of 1921, when Collins's squad assassinated 14 British officers in Dublin, established his notoriety. When he arrived in London for the treaty negotiations, he was the most wanted man in Ireland. But he knew the value of that notoriety and was conscious of his own public image, using it to his advantage.
He's a thoroughly ordinary, flawed man. You can see the little vanities, I think, some of the time, where he's his own audience occasionally, where he's shouting, "Yay, we did that." Like, for instance, when he notes the press coverage of De Valera's escape from Lincoln Prison.
You're very welcome to the Mícheál Ó Coileáin Centre, Donal, here.
A member of the wider Collins family has established a centre where those curious about Collins, and there are many, come to learn more.
His whole life and times was quite complex, really, and we like to sit people down here and kind of go through it step by step, and we think that's the only way really to have they leave with a good grasp of the thing. I mean, a lot of Irish people get kind of mixed up about all of this history, not to mention people coming from other countries trying to understand it. But I suppose people are fascinated by his death and what happened at Byrne and who may have killed him and all of that, and they ask questions like, why was he buried in Dublin and not in West Cork? And you know, we're doing this job now 25 years, and you hear the same questions being asked. But overall, they're just fascinated by this larger than life figure, and that's what he was. Now, what I have here, Christine, is actually a very rare and precious document that we picked up there recently. It's an autograph book that was filled up by different people involved with the IRA and Sinn Féin back over 100 years ago, with a connection to County Armagh, which of course is in the north of Ireland. So I'll turn away the pages here now until we come to Mícheál Collins, because he's actually in here. So that's actually his signature there. Look.
Wow, that's a privilege, you know. I'm feeling very special today. I think we had our own heroes for the resistance, and Mícheál Collins reminds me a lot of our French heroes, the way he fought, the way he had that strong spirit and will to defend his country and to keep his country independent.
It was lovely to come. It was sad though, to come and see all those pictures and pictures of his family and all that he went through.
He really has gone on in history. He really has means something to people, and yeah, it is wonderful to see that he isn't forgotten.
I grew up under the glamour of Mícheál Collins. He was always somebody that was spoken about in our house when I was growing up. My mum, who was born in 1915, remembers people coming to her home on the day and said they shot poor Mick.
He has always fascinated me. I suppose going back to my childhood and learning the history in school. I suppose I was always fascinated. I was fascinated by the trip to Glasnevin and seeing his grave, and I suppose a man that I admired for what he did for our country.
Of course, we all had family and things that lived through all this war, and it was a terrible time. I imagine that civil war that went on in this country.
Did you grow up with any sense of that division in communities?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Because his uncle was shot.
I had a granduncle that was shot during the Civil War, so it would have. I think it was October, November 22.
And which side was he on?
He was on the Free State side.
In Clonakilty itself, the house where Collins spent some of his teenage years is now a popular centre, taking visitors through major chapters of Collins's life.
Why they come? I suppose Mícheál Collins, you know, he's kind of one of those enigmatic characters that people have a huge interest in, whether it be people who are coming from abroad and want to find out more about Mícheál Collins, but obviously the large portion of our visitors are from Ireland who already know who Mícheál Collins is and want to find out more about this man that is so popular and such a divisive figure as well, but obviously a hugely kind of interesting character nonetheless. The Mícheál Collins movie really has been a kind of a source for Mícheál Collins' story to go worldwide, really. That period in Irish history, a lot of countries have similar periods and have similar characters that and people can kind of relate to this kind of heroic and romantic figure as well.
I think they're most interested in Collins as a soldier, Collins as a freedom fighter, Collins as a hero. We tend to try and present him as less of a hero and more of a man, if you like. You know?
How do you do that?
We do that, I suppose, primarily because we're in Clonakilty. We look a lot at his formative years in this area and how he started out in life and how he maybe wasn't all that different to many other people starting out at the time. But in looking at Collins, I suppose I was, as I say, trying to deconstruct the hero into the man. And yet, to be fair, what I found that surprised me was, for example, if you read the witness statements, the people who knew him, the Bureau of Military History witness statements, his extraordinary generosity comes up again and again. It does seem that Collins was a man who would give you the shirt off his back if he thought you needed it, you know.
Mícheál Collins was only 32 when he died, and his short life and early death continue to fascinate many people today. Join us in part 2 when we explore how he died and his continuing legacy. You're very welcome back to Nationwide. It was Mícheál Collins's role in delivering the divisive Anglo-Irish Treaty and the subsequent civil war that led to the circumstances of his death. 100 years on, Collins remains an icon of Irish history and a romantic figure for many. Each year, flowers are still laid at his grave on St. Valentine's Day.
You get interesting stories. There was one lady from the States and she used to order them from America, and she used to write card messages that were very lengthy and quite racy. Then we had girls, a lot of French actually, a youngish girl from France. She used to buy roses all the time, she was only in her 20s. She just said she loved them. Another customer who said that if she'd been born 50 years earlier, Kitty Kiernan wouldn't have stood a chance.
Kitty Kiernan and Mícheál Collins were due to marry before his death. Collins had met Kitty at her family's hotel in Granard, County Longford, when he was campaigning there.
Kitty herself loved to dance. In fact, in one of her letters writing to Mícheál Collins later, she said, "I danced 50 times tonight." So that was all very, very much part of the spirit they had.
But when Mícheál Collins entered Kitty's life, she had another suitor, Collins's friend, Harry Boland.
Harry Boland, of course, was smitten by Kitty too. And interestingly, there's a letter from Harry Boland's mother to Kitty stating, "I am delighted that you are going to marry Kitty Kiernan." So, but Kitty herself assured Mícheál Collins that he was the one. So I suppose she was pulled between the two of them for some time, but Mícheál Collins won out. I'd say it was quite a distraction for him to come here to Granard and to have the love of Kitty and to be supported by that. And strangely, they wrote to one another over a period of 2 to 3 years every day. I'd say she was very vivacious. I'd say she lived in the moment. That she really loved her social life. But what I would think is at the end, when Mícheál Collins died, she was absolutely broken-hearted. And I don't think she ever got over that.
Collins spent his last night in this room at the Imperial Hotel in Cork before he embarked on a tour of West Cork, some thought ill-advised and poorly planned.
It is surprising then that the Commander-in-Chief is doing these inspection tours around the south of Ireland, around Munster. You know, that's not a job for a Commander-in-Chief of an army, particularly in areas that are so disturbed, that are moving towards guerrilla warfare, that are having ambushes all the time. And that's the reason why questions have been asked as to, you know, what was really going on in August 1922? Why was he down there? Was there another reason for this trip around, you know, the back roads of West Cork? Because it doesn't make sense for a Commander-in-Chief of an army to be doing that.
What might that other reason have been?
The other reason, apparently, supposedly, might have been peace overtures or peace negotiations with the IRA, with the irregulars as they were called. He didn't have much military experience. I mean, his only military experience, such as it was in the GPO in 1916, and that didn't really end well either.
He and his party had left Cork City to visit a number of towns, but they made a fatal mistake by asking directions near Béal-na-Blá from an anti-treaty scout. After their tour, the party made their way back towards Cork, but their presence in the area was now widely known, and the ambush had been laid on the basis that they might return by the same route. They did. A number of the ambushers had given up waiting, but some remained at the site. Emmett Dalton, Collins's aide-de-camp and an experienced soldier, gave advice that Collins ignored.
The only one thing that we could have done was drive on, which I said to the Commander-in-Chief, I said, drive like hell. But he elected to stop here and fight them, you see. So we did. So after about 10 minutes of our engagement here, he got up, he saw movement, and he moved to the back of the armoured car. Used it as protection to have a better sight of what was happening on the hill above.
One of the escort party later recalled the events of that evening.
It was an ideal place for an ambush. It was made for an ambush. But the firing went on for a considerable time after we getting out on the road. In fact, in all, to take from half an hour to 3/4 of an hour firing, we could see the road being split open. In fact, I honestly believe myself that they could have killed us all if they so wished, but I'm sure the one and only man that they were aiming at, or trying to aim at anyway, was General Michael Collins. He was the only man that they wanted to put out the wire. A private soldier didn't matter very much. But after a time, the firing lulled, and we only heard distant shots, distant peals of shots like away in the direction of Cork. And General Michael Collins stood up and had a gaze around him. He was loading his rifle in the meantime, and whilst he was loading his rifle, one lone shot, apparently like from a sniper, rang out and hit him in the side of the head, the right-hand side there, fell down, and he never spoke again. So the firing suddenly opened then just as Collins fell, so that practically nobody was able to go to his aid at that time. And the firing held for about 1/4 of an hour after Collins falling in the road. I'd say that he was dead instantly as he did fall, but anyway, General Dalton and the officer that happened to be in the armour car came over to him and rendered him all the assistance that they could. All that they could do was bandage his head, but there was little more that they could do.
You know, the reports that we have of that evening is that he was not taking cover. He was out in the middle of the road. The other members of the convoy are, you know, behind the armoured car and the touring car. He was certainly naive, if not reckless, and you know that the outcome of that naivety is perhaps shown in the fact that he was the only one who ended up killed on that event.
No one can say exactly how Michael Collins died. There are theories and stories about Dalton being involved in the death, about an accomplished sniper being among the ambushers, about a ricochet bullet, and about the gunner in the armoured car being involved also. They remain stories and theories, no more than that. What we do know is that by his actions at Béal-na-Mláth, Collins greatly increased his own risk. The manner of his death does not, however, appear to detract from his legacy. And there was more to Collins than political pragmatism.
I think that term misses the charisma and the vivaciousness and the impetuosity that was also part of his character. And that's why he's so appealing, both for the general public and for historians, that he combines these two different sides of his character. On the one hand, very capable, hardworking, calculated, building a movement, building a network, but on the other hand, somebody who would just have been really nice. I think he would have been really nice to be around, and that's why there was such grief when he died. People mourned the loss of a friend as much as a statesman.
I would say that often to our visitors here. He wasn't a saint, he was a human being, and we all have faults, and Collins had some human failings obviously as well. But I mean, I would often say to people here that he seemed to be the complete package. If you wanted to look for the maximum number of talents in a leader, well, Collins seemed to have a fair lot of them. He seemed to, I would often say he ticked an awful lot of boxes. And I would say about Michael Collins as well, he was the one leader from that time that could not have been done without. I think if he was not into there at the time, would we have achieved the level of independence we did achieve? And then, of course, if he'd lived on, what else would he have done? That's the big question.
On Fridays nationwide, ahead of next Sunday's 100th anniversary commemoration of the death of Michael Collins at Béal-na-Mláth, we look back at how the commemoration there began and how it's grown to become a significant national event.
And there's more commemorations over on RT Player with commemorative programmes on RT Radio 1 as well from 7 a.m. on Friday. But next here on RT Television, some serious drama coming up in EastEnders.